Welcome to the land of no easy answers. Our world, though more connected than ever, seems to have forgotten how to connect. Everywhere you look, the disconnect is obvious, from nature to the people around us, and even within ourselves. This is Alex Knight, and thank you for joining us as we attempt to unravel the mysteries of the mind and your universe. Now let's meet our panel. Over in one corner is Kristin Rumohr.
A most hearty hello to you all.
And in the other corner, Aaron Stewart.
What?
Today, it's all about the homeless problem. And Aaron is laughing about homeless people. What a way to start.
Yeah, I know.
That was poor timing for laughter.
That was, yes. Well, this will be one of those episodes where it will be somewhat less humorous, I suppose, than other episodes. Yeah. But, hopefully we can find some hope out of this thing and maybe find some actual concrete solutions to what we might be able to do about this problem instead of just kind of shuffling it under our, judicial heel.
Yeah, pretending like it doesn't exist. And this is it's a complex matter, and I don't think this will ever go away.
It should.
It should, but it won't. I don't.
It could. This feels like something we've made a choice of.
Yeah.
Versus something that we need to accept as the truth.
Yeah.
And that I think is a real thing that we need to start addressing in our society. Is what parts of these things benefit us? Is it actually beneficial for us to criminalize the homeless?
Right. ...
Question mark ... Right. Like let's think about this for a second. Right. Like, has there ever been a time where that's been proven to work effectively?
No. Don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
No. That's
well,
the thing. There's no document.
Supposedly, I guess, with like colonialization, when it was just to send people away into camps that have now developed into actual countries and civilizations. So arguably, like way back in the day, it was like beneficial to some people in power just to send people off.
Exactly.
Yeah, but obviously that is not something that happens now.
Well, also, we need to remember too that a lot of homeless people, there's a lot of mental health problems in the homeless community, and we've historically, and still very much to this day, have always wanted to just sweep these problems under the rug and under the proverbial rug and pretend that they don't exist, right? And that doesn't really solve the underlying issue. Many years ago, they used to, one way they would deal with this problem was just throw these people into an institution. Right, and treat them horribly. I might add, like the conditions of these institutions it's like something out of a movie. It was frightening, right? The way the flagrant disregard for human life and lack of respect. There was no dignity for the people that needed help. People in positions to help these people just weren't there for them. And also back then, 40, 50, 60, 100 years ago, even going back that far, there was a lot less that we understood about the various types of mental health conditions that we run into today, right? Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is when you couple ignorance with lack of care, it's bad. And today we just want to, there's every city has homeless camps. There's always talk, well, what do we do with this? And got to move the homeless camps from one place to another. There's always talk, I always hear talks about creating sustainable housing for these people. And, there's some initiatives that you hear about, but it doesn't really, there isn't a grand scale initiative to really I don't even know how to how do you even fix this problem?
I think it comes down to and this goes back for ages, centuries, right, is dehumanizing the poor.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what we are continuing to do. Is there's this line drawn between us and them, right? Like those people.
We forget that
something needs to be done about those, right? And we kind of forget that all of us, I think in Canada, it's something ridiculous. Like all of us are 3 paychecks away from potentially being one of them.
Oh, that's scary.
We forget that the operative words in homeless people are people, right? Like they're people.
Yeah.
And just because they're homeless, that doesn't mean that's who they are. And that's, I think, the disconnect that we have here is that we assume that they got there because they deserved it.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, instead of, we all, again, have to take control of this stuff because a lot of this is being controlled for us. And a lot of us are in, like Kristin said, 3 paychecks away from being there, literally.
And we're kind of fed this lie, so to speak, that if you work hard enough, you can be successful, right? It's your own fault that you don't make enough money. I mean, how many times, I know I've been told this in my life, you probably have, I'm sure everyone listening has been told, just work a bit harder, put your head down, get another job, right? You're making the excuses for it. And it's just not true, right? In today's culture, back in the day, sure, maybe it was more likely that you could get that entry-level job and move up without having to pay for education and get proper raises and be able to afford a house. And it's just not reality for most of us anymore. And we kind of then lose track of that. And it's easy if you're not in that situation, I suppose, to start blaming. It's easier to do that than to find solutions. So it seems anyway. I can't think of any other reason why we've gotten to this level.
Yeah.
When as the one here with kids in the game, like I looked out into the world early on and I looked at, what my mom had done, and she worked 2 jobs, she busted her ass for us, and I love her for the, everything she's ever done for me. But I looked at what my son was going into, and I just went, there's no way that is the same thing that's going to work for him. Mm-hmm. He's not going to be like, she worked at the same places for like 20, 30 years. Wow. And that's just not a reality for literally anything nowadays. Like I dare you to find someone that's been at their job for 20, 30 years. I would love to hear from them. Right. And just most of us are now in this gig economy, the hustle, and this thing where
it's another problem.
That's the problem. So now these jobs that were supposed to support us, and you used to be able to survive working as a waitress, and that used to be able to get you a house and a place to stay, and you could get food and you could take care of your family that way. And it's just not true anymore. And that's a problem. And that's not their problem. And that's kind of the issue here. We want to blame them and consider them as the problem instead of looking at the actual systemic issues that led to that. We don't ask the why. And again, assume that they're people and that they're, flawed, and we need to help each other through this, and sometimes we all have
what kind of keeps our biases in check, right?
Exactly.
It's easier to then say, yeah, you are the problem, because then we get to keep up this la 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 merry facade of our world is perfect and society is beautiful.
Yeah. And you get to put them in jail as if that actually fixes the problem. Like, it's like I always say, you can't make someone smarter by hitting them in the head. I mean, that is actually scientifically not true. That has been, like, there's documented cases where it's actually triggered autism and miscellaneous brain functions that weren't available before. But in general, I just, I can't, you're not going to, by damaging your brain, you're not going to make yourself think better.
Right.
And so the idea that you can, take away homeless problem by putting them in jail. Well, who's paying for the jail, dummies? Who's that, us? Oh, well then, so now we're just taking the money we were paying for them to stay on this, and now we're paying for the jails and this other system and the lawyers and now they have to deal with, again, now when they come out of jail, they're obviously in a better position to get a house, right?
Yeah.
How did we help them? That's the problem.
Well, and it goes back to stigma too, and it's not just mental health. Like, what about homeless people that are dealing with substance abuse problems too? And how do you get out of that? And you it all comes down to having compassion for people and realizing that, hey, that person was someone's kid at some point, that, things went sideways for them. And like you said, Kristin, I mean, it doesn't take much for a lot of people to find themselves in a position where, oh, suddenly you've lost your home, you've lost your job, you've lost your home, you know, the bank's repossessed everything, you know, it probably, there are very few barriers between the average person and being homeless, being put in that situation, right? So I could see how somebody could turn to substance abuse because they're trying to deal with these complications in their life for various reasons, right? And so we have to have these programs. We need to get people that are stuck in these stuck in these situations, like figure out a path for them out of this, to get them to get them clean and to get them a place to live, so that they can have a permanent address, so that they can actually find work, so they can be productive members of society again. To figure out to have training programs so that they can actually learn how to live productive lives, right? Maybe they didn't have that. Who knows what their upbringing are? Who knows what their upbringing was? I mean, that's the other thing too. We make an awful lot of assumptions. We judge people without knowing anything about them, right? We just think, all these homeless people, they're all lazy, shiftless, assholes that just don't want to contribute. They just want to, take welfare, and they, my tax dollars are going to all these people, and they're just gonna use this money on drugs and booze anyways. And that's an awfully myopic, limited way to look at things.
Mm-hmm. But it's
easier to believe that than to do something, I suppose, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah. And so you brought up the point of, substance abuse. Like let's talk about the role of the opioid crisis in all of this. And how are we dealing with that? Instead of dealing with the underlying issues as to why people get homeless and why that's so prevalent in our society these days, and actually, taking the accounting of why and how to fix it, we want to just blame. And again, that's easier inside our heads, but it doesn't fix the problem. And so again, we just keep running through this cycle. Oh, they're homeless, throw them in jail. Oh, they're homeless, throw them in jail. Without ever addressing the issue of why they were homeless. How do we fix it? How do we actually get them out of this cycle? And again, forgetting that we have to pay for all of this. This costs us this whole cycle of putting him in jail and then moving him around and take the city and bring the police in and move the tent city over to here now because we don't want them in this area. People kept complaining instead of just finding them someplace to stay. I mean, taking care of them as if it were an actual crisis that, as a society of caring individuals who care about our neighbors and everyone around us, this should be something that's a no-brainer. It just feels like it's not a costly thing to fix either, right? Like it seems like something that we have the means to do something about.
Well, we certainly do. Again, we choose, we make decisions in this country to put money into certain things, right? You have all these tech startups that are putting money into all these different avenues, right? Just think of and all the money that goes into the military too. If a fraction of that money even went to, fixing the problems in urban neighborhoods, right? Let's educate people. Let's make sure people have food, But no, we decide to spend billions of dollars on having a new fleet of airplanes. Okay, yeah, I don't know exactly what that's doing for us, but it doesn't seem to be doing anything as far as I can tell. This article here that was the whole start of this conversation on Psychology Today about the criminalization of poverty and homelessness. I thought this was interesting because the person that wrote this has some not only experience in working in this area, but also she says actually she experienced homelessness as a child, as a youth, and she actually says in here, quote, "As our country edges towards post-pandemic individual and community life, we see clear evidence of deepening economic and racial inequalities. Any walk or drive through our urban areas from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles reveals a steep rise in visible poverty and homelessness, especially for persons of color. With this rise comes an increased push to criminalize people for being homeless. From my nearly 40 years as a nurse and researcher working with homeless populations and my lived experience of homelessness as a young adult, I know that criminalizing poverty and homelessness does not work. It only worsens the problem. And she said here in Seattle, where she is, which already had one of the nation's highest rates of homelessness and income disparities before the pandemic, tents and other temporary living structures made of cast off materials. She's saying that, where is it here? Cars, RVs, and trucks with screened off windows and windshields. The temporary homes of vehicle residents dot the landscape. A house next door to my own home in a mixed income neighborhood near the university where I work has changed from being an informal refuge for homeless squatters to a flipped single family home currently on the market for $1.2 million. $1.2 million. Wow.
Which will definitely help fix the homeless situation.
Oh, yeah. Totally. Yeah, everyone's got $1.2 million.
Yeah, and that's kind of, in Vancouver here in Canada, we have some of the highest house prices in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Is greed the main problem? Is that what it really boils down to, is just greed?
I
Well,
would
an
ask you to
entitlement,
point to
I
something
think.
else. Yeah, that's like point to something else other than greed that would be driving it. Like, show me something. Like, what other motivation would there be for that?
Yeah. Which is absolutely bonkers in my mind to be,
absolutely.
Speaking just from Vancouver, where we're all from, it's now become one of the most desirable places to live. And then that entitlement issue that because you have money, you can come here, and then you have the right to say to people that were already here before you, get out, you don't belong here because you don't have enough money.
Mm-hmm.
And literally pushing people out. I mean, it's gotten so bad here because it's so unaffordable for the average person.
Yeah, listen to this. In the United States, they said that criminalizing homelessness has a long history. Despite that, it has never worked. As the National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty documents, criminalization worsens homelessness and racial inequalities by weighing down already impoverished people with hefty fines, jail sentences, and criminal records. Criminalization diverts money away from supportive housing and basic health, including mental health and substance use disorder treatment, that are more cost-effective at preventing and addressing homelessness. This goes back to what we're saying, like addressing the real problem. Communities that criminalize homelessness have higher rates of violence against people living or even appearing to be homeless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Again, the stigma, right?
That's a big
if you're
part of
homeless, you must have deserved it.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a real issue moving forward because things ain't getting cheaper. This isn't going away. This isn't something that the government shows any initiative to even want to try to deal with at this point. It's just been an ongoing thing, and they know it's happening. We've sent letters, we've asked, there's been protests, and it still just keeps on going up. So it seems like a problem that's beyond that, and something that we really need to, as a whole, look at, instead of just relying on the government to fix this for us. It's going to become worse. And again, without addressing the root issues, if it's the opioid, if it's mental health, we need to find productive methods of dealing with this instead of just trying to, like you said, shuffle it under a rug somewhere. Otherwise, again, it's just going to keep, this cycle never goes away and will only get worse.
Yeah, I like what the author of this article said too, that policies and programs led by people with the lived experience of homelessness make them more innovative and effective. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. When you suddenly have if you have a group of people that are trying to solve this problem that don't have any experience, I'm not saying that that's irrelevant, but God, it sure does help having that perspective, right? Like somebody's been there, done that, right? They've seen the worst of it.
We're talking of perspective too. It also shifts the perspective of their lazy, useless pieces of shit.
Yeah, because that person changed their life.
Exactly.
That proves, they are living proof that you can make a change, that things can get better.
Well, and that they're motivated to do it. Again, we want to paint them as these broken people that deserve to be homeless, instead of just people that, had some hard times, like opioids are just a fucking brutal nightmare. And it takes so little for your grandmother to break a hip. They put her on some pills and now she's addicted. And that's the problem. We don't, these are normal people that this is happening to. These people aren't broken. Sometimes maybe they are. But again, the point is this is happening to more normal, regular people than and instead of addressing these issues, we want to just, again, forget that this happened and blame them for this, instead of trying to, again, assume that maybe they might be able to take a hand in their reform.
Yeah.
That they might know what they need to do. And unfortunately, they were just dealt a hand that they had no control of this situation. And here we are. Right. But if you just give me just this little, if I could just get this little, hey, nothing, and so my head, I've been having a real it's a real tough time for me to just, no. Okay. Maybe if I just push, nothing, right. And if you leave them with no options, what do you expect is going to happen? Let alone blame them. And now it's again a negative loop inside our head that just makes you feel that worse every time it loops through, and therefore sets up this destructive cycle where there's no hope of fixing them, because they don't feel like they deserve to be fixed, which is a lie.
Yeah. Having going back to the challenge of being able to find work, you need a permanent address, and man, that is just so difficult. I knew someone, I dated someone who for a period of their time didn't really have a home, didn't have a permanent place to stay. And, that was, I can't even imagine. I can't relate. I've never, I've always been lucky. I've never had to deal with anything like that. And I hope I never have to, because it really, the lack of empathy that a lot of, that people seem to have too, for people that, they're just lazy. Why don't you just get a job? Just get a job, right? It's like, okay, yeah. Well, if your parents throw you out of the house, or maybe you're in an abusive family and you don't want to stay there because it's possibly even dangerous to be there, what are you going to do?
Well, and, Lord Dichotomist to the rescue here. Let's just consider this in another light,
okay.
And I had it with me, and then damn it.
We can come back to you.
Yeah, and it was, fuck.
That's okay. Kristin,
yeah,
do you ever, have you ever talked to homeless people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I worked in mental health for a long time, so a lot of my client base was technically homeless.
I'm sure you must have seen a plethora of different stories, life stories about how they got there. And
oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's, what we always come back to is you don't know anybody's story. And at the end of the day, we're all just human, right? And I was blown away by the majority of clients I had that were homeless, or, that odd time, like you stop to talk to someone on the street instead of just stepping over them. They're not all criminals. They're not all there to steal from you, or, everyone's got a story, and you just need to come back to that spark, that connection of humanity. No one's necessarily there by choice. They've all got circumstances, whether it be a lot of mental illness, of course, where it's, you literally cannot hold down a job. And the only way of you feeling like you belong is then kind of going in with this group of people that also maybe have some issues, right? So it's a lot more complicated than, you chose to be there. It's, you take someone that's felt like an outcast, that's been shat upon their whole life, and now they suddenly have friends and they can create their own sense of community. So that's also a strong tie, and it's tough to take that away from them, which is a huge problem now when it's trying to force them out, right? Closing down camps, even finding housing. Well, you're now separating a community, which isn't going to solve the problem either.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll just share this one thing, and it always bothered, it never, even from a young age, it never sat well with me. You know, I love walking around, not just in Vancouver, but I mean, any city that I visit. You know, homeless people have never frightened me. I've never been afraid to walk through an area that has a lot of homeless people, because for the most part, they might ask you for money, but most people are harmless, right? But you know, somebody in my family, I won't even say the name, but you know, was always told me to be careful, like, you know, like cross the street if you see homeless people, like don't go in that part of the city. And I've never had a bad experience, right?
Yeah.
For the most part, that's the thing. I think what it comes down to is we don't even want to, like, we're afraid to even make eye contact with those people. Like, oh, they're all dangerous. You know, you could get murdered at any. That is not the reality with most homeless people.
No.
Sorry, it just isn't. You're more likely to get abused by a family member than you are to get attacked by a homeless person, right?
And
you're
that's
more
a good
likely
segue
to
back
die
to-
in a car crash than get murdered by a homeless person. That just isn't a reality.
Right.
So it really bothers me when people are like, oh, they're all dangerous.
But okay, so that's my segue back to the original point that I had lost for a second there, was the entitlement of all of this, right? Is that the reason that you're afraid of those homeless people is what? Because they're going to take something of yours? You know? And so again, we come back to these $1.2 million houses and the just like gaudy entitlement of thinking that you deserve a $1.2 million house while other people don't have. And I just like the mind blowing, just, you know, I was just reading about the Vancouver house that in over 10 years has gone to like $22 million. And I just go, why do we need this for? You know, like just the idea that you deserve this just seems crazy to me, you know? And so trying to shift this idea of, you know, maybe some of these other people should be homeless instead of the people that are there right now, right? Like, you know, and this idea that, you know, you deserve these things while others don't deserve anything, you know. And again, this fear of homeless, where does that stem from? Is that because you're afraid
I think
of,
I think a big part of it is it starts with listening. And I think people, if you would just take the time to listen to people and get them to share their story. I've talked to homeless people before, and sometimes they have like really, I talk to them like about, you know, how did they get there? And oftentimes I'm like, you know, it's a really interesting story and it's complicated. That's the other term to emphasize. A lot of it is very complicated. And I think if more people just listen to people and, you know, try to be a little more compassionate, you'd probably realize that they're not criminals.
Well,
Some of them may do criminal things, but they're not all criminals. I mean, they're not.
How many of them are fucking college educated?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's my question. Like, how many of these people were, you know, they did what they were supposed to do. They studied, they did, you know, they saved, they did all these things, and then something came along and took it all away. And now they're left on the street and you're not showing any compassion for that. Like, oh,
you know I'll tell you, you know what? I will tell you what's fucking criminal. What's fucking criminal is working your ass off in school to get a PhD and having $100,000 of debt that has to be paid back. That's fucking criminal.
Yep.
That's how they reward you for going to school to educate yourself to be a productive member of society.
Exactly. That's
awesome.
The thing. You go out to better yourself, which makes you better for the society that you're living in. And that is of no value to this society that we've built.
Not really.
How does that make any? So you've gone to train yourself in this thing that our society values.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because you had to pay even more to get into those classes that, you know, were of value. Hey. But we don't show any value to you doing that. We make you pay for it and then charge you interest and right, like, and ruthless loan collection people.
Yeah.
Right? Whose only job is just to take money from you that they don't like. Did they earn it? No, they're just there to collect.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And
well,
so
how can you ever get ahead?
There's the beginning of the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it could happen to any of us. And that's the problem. If you don't put yourself in those shoes, it would be very hard to show any compassion for anybody there. Okay? Without actually considering that, how close you are to being there, it would be pretty easy to step over that person without any consideration for that is you, or could be you very easily, And so without, again, addressing the underlying issues as for why people are becoming homeless, we're never going to fix this, and it's just going to become more of a problem. We're just going to keep putting more people in jail, and then the jails, which again, we pay for, are not, again, equipped to deal with the mental health issues that people who have been kicked out of their house for no fault of their own due to things that, they had no control over. And now they're put into this position where they're now even double fucked, let alone triple fucked. If they've got fines and court fees to pay, how are you supposed to pay that with no job in jail? Like, come on.
Yeah.
And so again, like I totally understand how this spiral becomes, again, a pattern of disease, basically, that takes over a life without your, control sometimes, the opioid thing, right? Like, again, 2-3 pills is enough for your brain to be addicted to that pill for life. Mm-hmm. And without understanding the underlying physiology of addiction inside the brain, you don't understand that it makes actual changes to the structure of your brain. Addiction changes your brain. Sure. Again, pointing out that we have control over the changes that happen to our brain, and without being aware of these structural changes happening, it's far easier to fall back into those patterns again, which again leads to these cycles, which leads to them going to jail and us paying for it. And then they come back out and we send them back to jail. And it just becomes because there's no way out. We've never offered them an off ramp. So if you had no options, what would you do?
That's a tough one.
Mm-hmm. And that's a question that unfortunately a lot of these people are grappling with, and really like you don't understand the struggle, just the mental toll that it must take. Like, just think about, all of you that are close to, three paychecks away, just think about this. Just imagine this inside. Wouldn't it be nice to not have to worry about that? To know that you will be taken care of, that even if your entire existence fell apart around you today, your society, the people around you were there to take care of you. Wouldn't that just take all of this away? And suddenly this whole mental toll that we struggle under every day, money, house, identity, entitlement, all these things that we've built around us, now become less of a, it's now more about how do we fix this thing, and less of a problem that we just need to make go away. Again, putting ourselves there, I think, is kind of the key to how we fix this. Again, we're all really close. Studies show it. You may try to deny it, but that's where we are. And that's because of our society and what we're doing to ourselves. So, yeah, we got to fix this.
What do you think of, let's just take this as an example. In Vancouver, you've got portions of the city where you've got these tent parks set up with homeless people living there, and they want to move them. So where are those people going to go? Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Like they have to be somewhere. And if shelters only have limited number of beds. That's the other problem too, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. There's no good solution.
Well, actually, one of the things that article pointed out was how many of the hotels and motels, converted them, with no travelers. They converted themselves into shelters, basically, and allowed a lot of these people to actually have a place where we could keep them separate, where again, the homeless communities, because they do live kind of close lives, were really struck by COVID.
Sure.
And a lot of them got really sick. And again, if you don't have access to healthcare, ways to, if you can't call in an ambulance because you can't afford it, well, again, how are we helping people if we're putting these obstacles in front of them and going, I guess you're fucked up. Too bad. Yeah, it's just, it boggles my imagination sometimes how we treat each other. And I just hope, and again, I see hope that we can treat each other better, but we need to start taking these steps. And the only way to take those steps is by addressing the issues that started it in the first place.
Yeah, addressing the stigma, and I think encouraging other people around us, you know, friends and family, to just, hey, try to be a little more, you know, compassionate, and realize that you haven't talked to all these people. You have no clue what their lives are like, where they came from, you know, who they are, what they're about. I mean, you just don't know. So it's arrogant of you to just conclude that, you know, they're just lazy, which is absolutely not true.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's got to start.
Going back to the brain physiology, like it's easier for us to destroy things than to build them.
Of course.
Right?
We always want to take the easy route.
Yeah. It's far easier for us to go and kick over someone else's sandcastle than to build our own sandcastle. You know, and unfortunately our brain rewards us kind of the same way, which is the really fucked up part about this whole thing. And again, if you didn't realize this was happening, this happens to all of us all the time. Right? That little perverse, like, when you step on somebody's toes and right, like there's that little childish part of us that has that little like, you know, despite the rest of us knowing that, well, you know, if that were to happen to me, I wouldn't want them laughing at me. How would you? You know? Yeah. So, you know, again, without understanding that we have these parts of our brain, it's tough to make any changes to them. And so this is where hopefully we come in and pointing to Mental Health Awareness Month, tying this back to, you know, the underlying issue. You know, the reason why we're talking about this is because there is help, you know, and we can get through this. And the idea that there's no way of fixing this problem, again, is myopic and feels defeatist. And that's not, I think, who we are. No, you know, we know the problem. We know that we should be fixing it. And the problem is that we've convinced ourselves that it's someone else's problem, you know, instead of ours to deal with and what we could do about it, you know? So yeah, be part of the solution, I guess.
But what is it's also easy to say that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as individuals, what else could we do? Other than, I mean, vote for the right, you know, lobby people and vote for the right people.
Yep.
I mean,
or call up your local homeless shelter. How many of them would be, you know, so happy to have extra volunteers? You know, go actually volunteer at any of these places. Like, I get that COVID is one of these things right now, but now that we've got vaccines and now we've reached a point where most, you know, good portion of us have had their first shot. I'm in on Tuesday. Right? You know, we get to actually go back to some semblance of normal, and we get to choose this normal we go back to. That's my thing. Like, we keep assuming that we just have to go back to the way things were, and I go, no, we don't.
Yeah, right? I did a volunteer thing once for I think it was the Salvation Army. It did a evening working in a kitchen serving meals to the homeless, and man, it was that was really perspective. It was really humbling, man. It was really humbling, because I just realized, man, I've got it fucking good also.
Well, right? And it's again, when the person passes by the line that's gone through the exact schooling that you have, right? That was in the exact same situation, and then something happened and now they're here, you know? And when you actually get to know that their stories are exactly the same as yours, exactly the same, except the circumstances led them to that, you know? And I think that's part of where we need to start finding the connection between this stuff instead of the disconnect. Hey, you know?
Yeah, and seeing firsthand the people, you know, in these positions that are working there with the homeless and greeting them and giving them hugs, which is something I don't think I would ever do. But like, you know, a lot of these people that come in like haven't bathed in God knows how long, and they smell, and these people they're so loving and so caring for the people that come in. They just treat them like family. And that to me is just amazing. It gives me hope for the future of humanity. As much, you know, as we see so much stupidity in the news every day, in politics. There's just so much of it that we see every day. But then you see stuff like that, and it's like, wow, there actually are some decent human beings out there.
Well, we're all decent human beings. That's the point that seems to be lost in a lot of this mess, right? And it's only by choosing to not be a decent person that, you can, we have this choice every day of what we do with, like you said, your time. Are we wasting it, watching TV and doing things that, obviously aren't really benefiting us in any major way and are just distractions from what we could be actually accomplishing with our life. And just, looking at that as, again, checking kind of the entitlement, the idea of going and volunteering allows you to kind of just check your own sense of entitlement. And the idea that, that you won't hug a person despite knowing that you could go and have a shower. You have that entitlement in your life that they don't.
Right.
And so the idea that you would deny them a basic human comfort of just giving a human being a hug, despite how much they may smell or be covered in whatever. Right? That if you were in that situation, you would please just give me a hug. Please. That's all I need. Sometimes to pull you out of this desperation, this despair of, I have no hope. I have no home. Where am I supposed to go from here? Right? Well, at least I got a hug, and again, just the idea that just the simple, I can go home and shower afterwards. So I'll give you this piece of me. And it's a small little piece, but it's that little seed of something that we need to start with. Again, we talked about last episode about if you start with this grand goal of we got to fix homelessness, well, obviously we're going to fail because we don't have steps to get to there. And we need to build those steps of, start with stigma maybe, right? Like just remove the idea that, they're homeless because they deserve it, and start from there. So if they do deserve better, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And just start having those conversations around how do we fix this problem instead of, just carting them off to jail as if that was the solution for anything.
It bothers me when I see really young people homeless, even more so. I look at that and I go, how does that even happen?
Think about their
there
home
should
life.
not be this person should not be on the street. Like
Absolutely not.
And I see sometimes I see people, like one time I saw this person on the street, couldn't have been older than maybe 20 years old, with their cat, and their cat was in terrible health too, and it had like scabs and chunks of hair missing, and I just looked at it and I'm like, how the fuck does this happen? Right? It really bothered me. It's amazing to me, you could be any age and be homeless, right? I mean, your situation is going to be different. Everybody's situation is going to be different. Sometimes it's just home life. It's just life dealt you a bad deck of cards, right? Yeah.
Well, that's like, Kristin, like what must that do to an adolescent brain, right? Like the idea that this safe place that you had has now abandoned you. Like how would you even deal with that?
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's
I realize that's a pretty grand question there. I mean, how would you fix that in 3 words? Go for it.
Yeah, exactly. Step-by-step plan.
Again, there's no generalization, and it's more just a matter of again, treating them like people, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. And again, the compassion, you brought up an excellent point about us being temporarily inconvenienced, perhaps, to help somebody that literally has nothing, right?
Absolutely.
That don't even have their basic needs. We take for granted that we can eat, that we can shower, that we can sleep uninterrupted for the most part, all of these little things. And to try and put yourself in that mindset of that's not just a given for a lot of people.
Well, imagine what that must be like for someone who has been forced out of their home and now they're on the street, and everybody that they're trying to ask for any even just small amount of help is just passing by, and just imagine how that would lead to desperation. That would lead to, hey, listen to me. And that would, so all of these things that you see as an action from these people are actually reactions that we are now seeing the end result of, instead of that being the beginning of their journey. Right. And that's I think another part of this thing that we need to address is how we get to these places, and how do we fix these? How do we put stopgaps in here so that, if you lose your job, you have a little bit of, right. And then we find some way of retraining you or find something for you, right? Like it's not that there's not jobs out there. I get robots are going to be taking a lot of this. And so we really do need to, again, kind of address work in general, and jobs and what that really means, because it's just not what it was anymore and won't be, right? Short of the machines going away, which I can't see tomorrow.
Yeah, we just need to make sure Skynet doesn't take over.
And that's the problem. Like a lot of these people that are they lost their jobs because robots came or the
Right.
the company moved on, and
Automation.
downsized,
Right.
and that's the thing. And
An
again,
ever-growing
because you're 3 paychecks
challenge.
away,
Yeah.
Again,
There's a big possibility that could be a lot of us very soon
Absolutely.
with exponential technology growth, right?
Yeah.
It's been happening. It is happening. It's been happening since the 60s with automating, car manufacturing. It's more and more that we've got drones now. Amazon is trying to deliver packages by drones. I mean, at some point it'll all be automated. There won't be drivers. I mean, it's going to happen. It is happening now. And the challenge of that is that, well, we need to prepare now. We need to start now. How do we actually, what does that future look like? What do we want it to look like? How are we actually going to, we can't let those people not have jobs. We have to have good, and I'm a big proponent of like government retraining. Why don't we have government retraining programs? If trucking is going to go away because we've got automated, Tesla's working on these big fully automated driverless trucks it's crazy, but like we need a way to retrain these people to do other jobs so that they can remain productive members of society, so that they can put food on the table for families, right? The homeless,
I think it's funny discussing it like
we can control. I'm saying in the future, the homeless problem is probably going to get worse before it gets better, but we have some sense of control. We can start doing that now. We can figure out how to retrain people for a new future, right?
I just think it's funny bringing it up from this perspective where it's, oh, well, it could happen to any of us very soon, which then suddenly sparks that, okay, well, what can we do to prevent that when this has been happening? Homelessness has been an issue for ages, right? It's until our livelihood is threatened.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a totally different perspective here.
Yeah.
But it's already happened. So instead of all of these things that, you or I or anyone else there listening is putting in place, okay, well, what do I do once the machines take over my job? How will I be taken care of? These are things that we should have thought of years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's so like as an artist, like I ask a question of like how many artists are starving right now, and why is that not considered a job that's worth supporting? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of these things that we don't consider jobs, which a lot of effort goes into this, right? Just to merely entertain you.
Also
right?
easier
because
said
we've
than
decided that these things are, worth investing in.
Yeah.
And these are not.
Well, it's also easier said than done too. It's hard to monetize, right? As someone who has been there trying to be an artist, whether it's, drawing stuff on a page or creating music, it's very difficult to make a living. Very few. There's a tiny percentage of people that are able to actually be successful at that, and through a combination of various factors make it big where they're able to make a very good living. But very few people do that, right? And
to
that's
that point,
tough.
Go check out our
problem to-
Patreon at the subvertpodcast.com Patreon, right? To support this artistic endeavor that we do here.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah, support us if you like the show. That's always nice.
Well,
We'd
of course
appreciate
you
that.
like the show. Otherwise, why would you have listened to us this whole time?
That's right.
I mean, it's because Kristin is amazing. I get it.
She is amazing.
She is.
She is. All right. Why don't we leave it there? Why don't we leave it there before this goes on for too long? I don't think we've actually solved the problem, but I'm glad we talked about it. I think Mental Health Awareness Month is good. I'm glad we're talking about this stuff. And we will likely be continuing these discussions in some form over the next couple of weeks here, because this stuff isn't going away anytime soon.
And hopefully we've just given you something to think about, right? If we can just spark an idea.
And start the conversation too. Like, let's come up with ideas. Let's talk about this, right?
Shift the perspective a little bit, right? Like try to, like instead of laying blame, let's try talking, and seeing how we can find solutions.
Yeah. We've been doing this for so long and it hasn't worked. So let's try something different. Why not?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And again, I challenge you to show me that it has worked. I'm an evidence-based kind of person. I have evidence to show that it does not work. And if you have something to prove otherwise, I'd love to hear it. But, you'd require significant amount of evidence to sway, and it's a proof of, evidence thing, but.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right. Thank you very much for watching on YouTube. Please make sure you subscribe to this show to make sure you get notified every time we release these on Tuesdays and Thursday mornings. And please do drop a comment below. Let us know what you want to hear us talk about in a future episode. We love hearing from you. We are also available as an audio-only podcast if you prefer that. Apple Podcasts, Google, TuneIn and Stitcher, Spotify, and Amazon Alexa, all the platforms. And you can hit us up on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Subvert Pod. We have a new blog that is going to be launching soon. It's available at thesubvertpodcast.com/blog. Sign up for the newsletter. And that way you will be notified of every single article that Aaron Stewart releases because he's going to be the one writing it.
I'm hoping you guys will start jumping into
Hey, I may throw in an occasional article if Kristin wants to write. I'd love everybody to contribute. And, maybe as we build this community in the future, which is something, one of the reasons why I'm doing this is to expand my community and expand our reach is, maybe at some point when we grow this to a much larger community, we can have other guest writers contribute articles. I really would like to make this a space where people can contribute. So I do encourage that. And thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. We are also available via email if you'd like to contact us and drop us a suggestion. It's hello@thesubvertpodcast.com. We don't always advertise the email address, but there you go if you want to hit us up the old-fashioned way. And before we go, always remember, we're all fucked up, so let's be fucked up together. Bye.